Yep.
Okay. Let's step to the direction of the conversations around the subsidies. And the new regime came into office, scrapped subsidies to unga, to fuel, and a bit of electricity. And it said that they are now introducing the subsidies to finance production. I think one of you mentioned that earlier on. You come from Kitui Central, which is an area that has experienced severe situations when it comes to drought and insufficient rainfall. What has been the impact of the subsidy fertilizer, for instance, and are we now on course to food security, at least for the next season?
Okay, maybe before I weigh in on that matter of subsidies, let me just comment on what Mr. Mwema said, the issue of the public debt and more so domestic borrowing, following up what the DP has said. Mm-hmm. And, you know, anytime I see the DP make public statements, it makes me get worried very much.
Why?
Because as we are discussing now, Sam, I've mentioned the budget policy statement, which is in the House. This is a document of the Kenya Kwanza government. If you look at that document, out of the 720 billion to be borrowed, it's only 198 which will come from foreign countries. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's foreign debt. Domestically, we are borrowing almost 598. So in a situation where we are borrowing 598 domestically, and you say you are stopping domestic borrowing, then you wonder whether this government is on the same page. And that ties very closely with what Henry is saying. You know, when you borrow locally, automatically you push the private sector out of that because the government is very liable in terms of repayment. And now we're talking about 14% interest rates. Banks want to buy treasury bills, treasury bonds, because those ones are assured of return. So my friend Renly and the colleagues and that sector, which is the private sector, they will die looking for credit which they can't get. Mm-hmm. And as he says, they don't have the luxury to go to the external market to borrow like the government. So I think what we are saying, basically, I want to agree with what Joy was saying. Let's think about concessional loans. Get out of this country, borrow out there, allow the domestic market for the private sector to borrow. In that case, we'll have an economy which is stable. Now, the other issue is the 2 billion, which is going to be paid. This is actually a Eurobond. You remember at one point, 2014, Sam, mm-hmm. I'm sure you were still here. If you remember 2014, this country borrowed $2 billion from the so-called Eurobond. And you remember that time we were discussing where did that money go? Mm-hmm. You remember at one point people were saying the money didn't even get to Kenya.
Right.
It was borrowed, people shared the money out there, and we are here paying as a generation. Now the money has come. Now this is the time to pay the money next year, June, 10 years after the Eurobond. Mm-hmm. And we have to pay. And the thing is, if we had introduced what we call a sinking fund, we will not be able to pay that loan easily. Sinking fund is where you put money on a continuous basis so that when the repayment is due, you just pick the money and pay. Right. That has not happened. So as we are talking now, don't be surprised to see another Eurobond to pay that Eurobond. That is what is likely to happen. But remember, we may not be able to say that now, where we are using the term liability management strategy so that you manage your liabilities. Let's see how things move. Let me come to the strategies. And I've said this many times. I've said this on many shows. I've said subsidies in any economy, they distort the market. So if there is a way, you do away with them, the best. But looking at what we are going through as a country, you might not be able to do away with subsidies. Now, the next level is to choose, do you go for consumption subsidies or do you go for production subsidies? The best is always production subsidies because those are more sustainable. They are more likely to have a positive impact to the economy. But now, what has happened, by the time Kenya Kwanza was taking over, the Jubilee government had already introduced consumption subsidies in the country through food subsidies and oil subsidies, where they were subsidizing the fuel. Now, where you have consumption subsidies, the strategy is not to take them just immediately. You don't do away with them immediately. You stagger the process in terms of removing them. In that case, then you cushion the poor, as you're saying. So what has happened is the Kenya Kwanza government came, introduced production subsidies, which is the best, But the problem with production subsidies, they require time for them to have the impact felt in the economy. For example, we gave out fertilizer out. Where in our area, fertilizer has no impact because it has not rained. So even as we are talking now, Sam, that fertilizer will not help our region. It may help other regions. Where it might be helping, we require 9 months for the crops to mature. So what happens between the month 0 to 9? You have removed the consumption subsidy. Now you require 9 months for this other one to have positive impact. So in between here, the ASALA will have to suffer seriously. So that's why I'm not worried. I'm not surprised when I see them go to the streets saying, I was watching some clips as I was coming here. Somebody was saying, "Atokiteremsha bei ya ngasi to 100 shillings. Kama sina unga, hainisaidii." Do you see that analogy?
There's nothing to cook.
So these are the issues, and that's what we are saying. I know we have serious economists in the Kenya Kwanza government. They have our own think tank led by David D. But at times, theories are not going to help this country. We want practical solutions to our problems. And I think that's what the theorists are missing. They are missing the practical aspect of this, combining theory with practice. That is what we are missing. And I would want to see, because I'm an economist by training, and I would want to see economics which is, we do the theories, which make a lot of sense, but also look at the reality so that we combine both, what I'll go, a delicate balance between theory and practice, so that we help the country. Otherwise, for now, subsidies are good, production subsidies are good, I support them, but Kenya is continue suffering till we get the results of production subsidies.
Okay, let me go to Philip first. I know you're itching to have a go at it, but when you reflect on, yes, this introduction of those subsidies for fertilizer, and at the same time you're expecting Kenyans, yes, wait for the production to make sense, but in between they're dealing with real issues, like what he's saying, real concerns. From your perspective, how then can Kenyans be in a position, yes, to wait for what the government is doing, but also improve their lives as they go along?
I think for me, from where I sit in my view, and that I understand as you think about it, consumption subsidies are not sustainable. And when you have a boil, the first thing you've got to do is remove it. It's painful, but you've got to do a hard stop on that. And I think on this one, I disagree with my good friend, Honorable Makali here, because the approach by the Kenya Kwanza government, I think, was the right one, because the consumption subsidies were politically driven, and they're not sustainable. And the best thing was first to, when your house is leaking,
right,
you first put a roof over it to stop leaking. And that putting a hard stop on consumption subsidies was the right approach. It's short-term pain, but on the long term, we will see the gains. Mm-hmm. And I agree, I think, as he correctly says, subsidies from a production perspective is what needs to be done. But as we talk about debt sustainability, these subsidies, we've got to be sustainable. Consumption subsidy was not sustainable into the future. That's it and done. Once you've pulled the plug on those subsidies, the question then should be, how then do you do a targeted approach to Mweni, Kamene, and Wanjiko, who need that unga at 100 shillings? Honorable Makali, for sure, does not need a subsidy to buy unga at 100 shillings. He's able to afford it at 230. So have a targeted approach to where the need is to Wanjiko, Mweni, and Akenyi, such that the beneficiaries get that benefit, but not having a mass approach on that consumption strategies. I think, and that's my strong view on that. So on this one, I agree with the approach by Kenya Kwanza government. And also, they've only been in power for 100 days. I'm looking forward the 6 months, the Kenya Kwanza.
6 months, not 100 days, yeah.
My bad. I'm looking forward to seeing their budget in April. submit it to Parliament, because that then will give us a good indication on where they're heading and where their true north is, so to speak.
Okay. Henry, tell me, when you reflect on all these measures, are there measures that you find that are geared towards improving local businesses, the area that you come from? Because yes, there's been investment in subsidy fertilizer for agriculture. What have you seen that is meaningful for your sector, but also for business in the country?
Sorry. Something I've seen that manufacturers can take up, and that is the entrepreneurs, is on their affordable housing. So whatever the government will be spending, that will be coming up to the manufacturers and also to the supply chain. So that is something I applaud the Kenya Kwanza, because it will be pushing money to Mwananchi. We are the same people who build. We are the same people who produce. So if we target that money to go to the Juakali artisans, like the people who do welding, that will be a plus for the economy.
Right.
Yep.
Dr. Daktari, when you reflect on still on these measures being put in place, and like Philip says, that yes, you may want to pull away the consumption subsidies, but also have targeted approach. How are Kenyans supposed to survive, waiting for the crop, which is appearing to be, it's going to be disappointing? The meteorological department are saying that the rains will largely be depressed in the coming long rain season. What are we doing?
No, that's the irony of it all. Like we said, the thought is about relieving Kenyans from the hard economic times by subsidizing production of food. Another problem is that we are not changing tactic. We're being told there's no rain. There's no rain. So in other words, this will not work. We're being told that indirectly. But then we are still going ahead with it. And to make the matters worse, you've just sent the least favorable way of having this subsidy. There are two ways you can do it. You can do a targeted subsidy, like they're saying, or you can do a universal subsidy. They have chosen a universal subsidy. All farmers, the rich and the poor. And what does the evidence say? Evidence has shown that when subsidies are universal, usually appropriation or allocation of the actual product is by political connections and social standing. Those who are politically connected, those who are better social standing, they have got more bargaining power and they tend to acquire most of the product. And so what has happened through, and what we know through evidence and research done, is that now the rich farmers are going to be in a better position to access. And those are the rich farmers who could have afforded fertilizers which are not subsidized. So there's a market distortion in a big way, meaning that the poor farmers may not, because the point is the government cannot satisfy the demand for fertilizers. So the poor farmers who really need the subsidies may not get it. And there is the risk of diversion into the local markets to be sold. These poor farmers are going to be buying the same fertilizer. I know they are saying, oh, we are registering farmers to control for leakages. But the truth is, you cannot deal with the conflict of interest. A farmer can be a trader. If they are well connected, they get more. They'll find ways of getting that into the market. So now this is a downfall of this. So in other words, we can see even from research in Malawi has done a lot of research. We have had a targeted subsidy before. We don't know how that went in terms of evaluation of its impact on the economy. But for sure, now that we are not yet food secure, it seems like something didn't work well there. So the point is, these subsidies that the government is having is not likely to work, unfortunately. In the first place, it's exclusive. It excludes those who are not going to get the rainfall. And secondly, it is still going to be exclusive because the poor are not likely to access it because it's universal. And when the bargaining comes in, they've got lesser bargaining power and they're going to be left out. So the point is, why don't we think about a more inclusive approach to subsidizing production? Why is nobody talking about technology? technology-driven agriculture and subsidize technology and help farmers learn technological ways of production. Today, you don't need a lot of water to rain on your farm to grow food crops. And there are a lot of examples in the world. There's a lot of that technology in small scale in this country which can be scaled up. Why don't we look into scaling up agricultural production technologies and subsidize those ones, because they are more viable than subsidizing rain-fed agriculture. It will not get us anywhere because the rain is not coming, and it will not come because we prayed for it or because sorry, it will not come, it was not going to come. Let me just end it at that. Let me just end it at that.
Excuse me, I hear you. So apart from, of course, the promise from the government is that they will put up 100 dams in the next 5 years, and they're doing this through public-private partnership. From your experience, how long does it take for such kind of promises to become a reality? Because, yes, they are great, they look good on paper, but Kenyans cannot live on promises. Their lives are real, they're practical.
I think what the government is saying is that, but before I come there, you know, we need to agree with Mwema that we are all supporting production subsidies. It's only the approach which you don't agree with. And I think Joy has put it very well. The issue of targeting and the way they did it. You don't withdraw just all of a sudden. It's good if they staggered, but I agree. So the issue of the 100 dams, you know, what they're talking about is the PPPs, the public-private partnerships, where to me, I think is the right approach in terms of doing it, because this will be off budget. So the issue we are talking about, budget deficits, is not likely to be a problem when we go that direction. The only challenge is the motivation of an investor coming to put a big dam in a place like Kitui, and then the expectation would be that after doing that, the way we are charging for the express highway, they will be charging for water and all that. So the capacity to pay for that water, do we have it? And I has just spoken about water being a necessity, no longer a luxury, the bottled water. So you find in most of our areas, even though this might be the right way to go, but I have serious questions relating to whether people will be able to pay the rates which will be agreed by that private investor for him or her to recover the investment in a given number of years. For example, we've given the expressway about 30 years to recover the investment. That is a bit easier because, you know, it's people who are driving who use that express highway. So they have the capacity to pay. Do you think my own mom, who is somewhere in the rural setting, will be able, when we get our dam ready, will be able to pay for the water they are consuming at home? They will always go back to their normal, dirty water, which may be somewhere in a river, because paying is not easier. But to me, from a perspective, a policy perspective, and approach to implementation, that is the way to go, if it can work. The other thing is, now, if we are to do it through the budget, not now off the budget, but through the budget, then these are investments which require a lot of resources. They are not cheap, those dams. They cost billions of shillings. And you see even the ones we have, the most popular ones, which are known all over the country, the Badisa Dam, the Uma Dam, they have taken a lot of resources from the consolidated fund.
Right.
And after now, they are not completed some. You saw yesterday, it was the day before yesterday, when we have a listing of projects which have taken trillions of shillings and they are still stored. They have not been completed. You could see now Uma requires an additional 2 billion, Badasa requires additional 4 billion for them to be completed. So if the government was to take up that, then you can see now the impact again in terms of expenditure. And I think the other thing we have not said, and I think we need to say it also, as a country, we also need to control our expenditure patterns. I think when you look at how much we are spending and how much we are collecting, that's where you find always we are borrowing. Because instead of going for fiscal consolidation, right, we are actually just letting it free, and we are spending so much. So it's time to tighten our belts and live within our means. But for me, from where I sit, I think the way PPP is the way to go. It will unlock a lot of these projects, and if we are able to pay, it will help this country in terms of development.
Philip, we have PPEs, or rather independent power producers in this country. We have power purchase agreements that have become a thorn for consumers, because they tell you that you either take or pay. And it informs why power is such expensive. So what is it that we must do even as we get into the PPPs with question of water supply, whether it's for irrigation or for human consumption? What is it that we must do in these negotiations to ensure that we safeguard the interests of Kenyans?
I think a couple of things in there. And first of all, I'll just let me quickly have a rebuttal on the issue of dams. Look at the budget policy statement. The intention is for us to increase the land under irrigation from about 670,000 acres to 3 million acres. The issue is not about it being expensive, doing irrigation. In 2023, we should not be doing farming like we were in 1963, how my grandmother used to farm. Irrigation and being self-sustainable as a country. Zambia has done it within a period of 1 year. Okay? What we need to be bold about is kickbacks and corruption in these dams, and that needs to be addressed. Be bold about it. It's achievable. Coming back to what we just posed on the issue of the independent power producers. Again, first of all, is eliminate the conversation on kickbacks and who's being paid what. It becomes becomes more affordable in there. And you've got to ask, do we want to be in a position whereby we have load shedding as it's happening in South Africa? Or you've got power? It's a balance that you've got to have. Anytime we have a quick blackout in Nairobi, you have the university students demonstrating and stoning cars. It's a small blackout. Now prolong that or go through load shedding, what's happening in South Africa. It's a whole different animal. Independent power producers supplement, and they've done the right thing. What needs to happen again, addressing boldly the issue of corruption, why don't we have the wind power being supplied to the national grid? We've got Electricana who've already done wind power and the uptake is there. We've got Kipeto up on Kajiado. It's up and running. And so we've got alternative sources of power which are cheaper. Mm-hmm. Why are we stuck onto our traditional? It's because Mweme and Makali kuna kitu kidogo. We've got to address that. And that is the issue. Mm-hmm. And I'm hoping the Kenya economy, because the government just becomes bold, and they only have their first time to do it properly. Yeah?
Yeah.
Kick up, excuse my French, kick up, kick hard, and clean up, and we'll have affordable power. Why we don't have that wind energy international grid, and it's way cheaper compared to the traditional that is done by diesel and the thermal, beats me.
Well, thank you for that. Though I was asking how we are to avoid such a similar situation affecting the water, because now water dams have to be done by public-private partnerships. But all the same, where do you get your water from as the Water Bottlers Association? And are you facing a shortage already?
A number of wells have dried up, so sometimes we are also depending on municipal, like Nairobi Water. So we've also been having the same challenges in terms of access to water for production, for processing, mm-hmm. or filtering.
So what is that production process like?
The filtering. We have two types of filtration. We have reverse osmosis, where we use a little bit of chemical and reverse the flow of low concentration to higher concentration. And that's how we are able to eliminate good water. We also have, now when you purify water from municipal, it's already purified. So it is a little bit easier because you will only be sieving through filters of different microns. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Very interesting. You want to say something about?
Yes, I mean, just on top of my mind, A couple of years back, we hit an aquifer when we were in Turkana. Why have we not transformed Turkana from an irrigation perspective with an aquifer in place?
I think I can say something.
Yes, go ahead.
There's an MP who was recently condemned because he suggested that we need to pipe Lake Victoria water and Indian Ocean water. That guy was not wrong. If we can be able to pipe fuel from Mombasa to Busia, to Uganda, to Eldoret, why is it hard for us to pipe the water from Lake Turkana to probably Eldoret or Kitale, or even use it to do farming in those areas? So that guy was not crazy, but people just felt he was even abused in Parliament, which was not okay. Yes.
Well, excuse me, very interesting about those perspectives. I want